it's a business. If you want to grow your business, you got to put money into it. And so, yeah, I'd say if you're a smaller podcast and you're trying to get some traction, if your goal is to become a podcaster professionally, you got to treat it like a business like no other.
Yeah,
If you want to open up a donut shop, you got to put some money into renting the place and the equipment and the dough and the sugar and the
yeah.
frosting or the glaze, whatever you use.
Now it's
You
made
got
me
to put
hungry.
money into
Thank you
it.
for that.
I know. Now I want donuts.
Yeah,
So if
I
you're
see what
trying
you're
to
saying.
build a business, you got to spend money on the business. If you want to keep getting 25 viewers and trying to build it that way, fine, do that. But you got to put some effort and money into it, and that's just how business works.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Top Trash, and stand back for another interview. This time, completing the Going In Raw lineup. I'm joined by the one and only Steve from Going In Raw and Wrestle Juice. So, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm glad to be back. I know that you've said, we did this a long time ago with me and Larson. No, we did one. Did we do one with me and Larson, or was it just me and you, and then you and Larson did one?
So, we did one with me, you, and Larson when I first started the channel,
Uh-huh.
and you guys were very gracious to help me record it and stuff. Then, about it will be about a year ago by the time this goes out, I had Larson on my
Oh, yeah,
show
yeah, yeah.
separately. So
Okay.
that's why I was like, I'd love to get you back on, my friend.
All right. Well, yeah, yeah. You're a completionist, and I can appreciate that. So you had one
Yeah,
half of the
I'm not
Going In
gonna
Raw
lie.
team,
Yeah.
right? And now you got the other one. So yeah, I'm glad to be here, man.
So if we take this back to the beginning, my friend, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
So, as a fan, it was in college. I do remember like the first time I was ever aware of wrestling was the movie Rocky 3, because I saw
Hmm.
that probably sure I would say probably like a year or so after it came out. I'm almost positive we rented it. I don't think I saw it in the theaters, but maybe I did. And I do remember very much, very distinctly. I remember the Thunder Lip sequence with Hulk Hogan,
Hmm.
and understanding even then, because I was probably 6 years old when I saw that, and it was interesting because at 6 years old, I could even pick up how they balance the line between this is a performance, this is a show that Thunderlips is putting on,
Hmm.
and like because that's how they portrayed in Rocky 3. It was all with sort of a wink and a nudge, and Rocky thinking it's all going to be fun, understood, hey, this is a tough business right here. And so Rocky 3, I think, was the first time when I realized pro wrestling is a thing, and it's a performance, it's not an actual combat sport. And then after that, I remember being a fan of the Rock and Wrestling cartoon show, the Hulk Hogan cartoon show, but not really having any interest in like the actual WWF like wrestling product. Honestly, I
Hmm.
think because it wasn't really on my radar. When I was 7 years old, my family moved to England, and I was there for 4 years. And I don't honestly recall like having like the base housing that we had, like the TV channels that it had.
Because your dad was in the Air Force, correct?
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force.
Hmm.
And so we had like military TV, which is like it's the same as United States television. It's just everything's like 6 months to a year later. I don't know why, but
Hmm.
that's the way it was. And I don't recall there being like pro wrestling on the TV. And plus, back then in the 80s, you're outside most of the time. You like watch TV as a last resort, not as
Hmm.
something, not as the first thing you go to. And so, like, it wasn't until I hit college in like 97 that like the friends that I started hanging out with then were into wrestling. That's including Larson and Hilton and all them and my friend Jeff. Like they were into it. And so like I was like, "Oh, this is cool. Like I get this." And I was actually really just more intrigued with like the NWO was coming up then, and the stories were actually really good, and I was interested in I don't know, I just took to it. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really fun, and ever since then like I've been a fan.
So you brought up last time, your co-host of Going In Raw, Correct me if I'm wrong. Larson said in our little episode that we did together that you met in college. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
We actually met in high school, but we were not like friends in high school. He was a year older than he was a grade ahead of mine. He's like 2 years older than me, but he's like a grade ahead of me.
Mm.
Um, and so because I think he's old for his class and I'm young for my class.
Is it like the
Um,
September baby thing
yeah,
that's
that's
in?
exactly no, yeah, because
But
I'm a
yeah,
September
yeah,
kid. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah, I
And
get
he's
that.
an August kid. Yeah. And so we actually were in the same physics class together. I was a junior and he was a senior, and I always give him shit. Larson's smarter than I am, but I like to say I was in physics a year before you were because I'm smarter. But we all know the score. And so that's I'm not gonna say we really met there. We might have like crossed paths and nodded to each other. We might have been in a group together at some point. I don't remember. But that's the first time I became aware of Larson as an entity. And then it was in junior college. I'm pretty sure it was my first semester of junior college. We happened to be taking the same astronomy class, and we were sort of kind of at the time I was kind of getting into his friend's orbit a little bit because my close friend Jeff was a good friend of his, so we had like a mutual good friend. And I remember I used to like one of my good friends was going to college like at the same time as me, and she was we graduated together and from high school, and so we would go to astronomy class. Well, within the first I don't know month or so, she ended up like a lot of people do in junior college. They go to college, they're like, this isn't really for me. It wasn't really her thing, so she dropped out. And so I was like, it was an astronomy class. It was like a big amphitheater, and so I was looking around. I was like, oh man, I know that guy down there. I'm just gonna go sit down next to him. And so I went down there. I was like, hey, Larson, what's up? And because we were already friendly, and at that point, because we were in class together, and then we would start like whenever we had college on the same schedule, we would drive together. We just became really good friends from that point on.
Was it the sort of thing that as soon as you saw each other in college again, you clicked?
Yeah, kind of, because it was like you want to stay familiar. We're people who me and Larson are both people who like our comfort zones. And
Mm.
so when I saw him, I'm like, I could sit down next to any of these people and try to make a new friend. I know that guy. I've already been sort of hanging out with his group, so I'm going to go down there and go down there and hang out with him. And when we did, like it was obvious very quickly our senses of humor were very similar. We laughed at the same stuff. We would try to make each other laugh kind of instantly. And so yeah, it was instant chemistry with us.
What is, and if you want me to edit this bit out, I will. What is a college story from your college days that people will be like, wait, Larson did that? I can't imagine him doing knowing him as a
uh,
podcast host.
I'll be honest, like we were nerds, like junior colleges, like you don't go and like live somewhere else. We did do that like after junior college, like we did a couple years of that. And then we all like me, him, Jeff, Hilton, we all moved down to LA together to do like the rest of our college careers at a proper college, like a state college, and we all lived together. I don't know, there's like honestly, like we didn't become like it was after college that we started like him and the guys, and then me eventually, we all lived in like this one big house where one of the roommates was like the liquor supervisor at like the local grocery store, so
Mm.
he'd always be skimming off the top and bringing alcohol to the house, and then we'd all just invite our friends over, so we'd have parties on a regular basis. And I mean that's when we would get drunk a lot. But I don't know, I'll be honest, it was so it was so long ago. I'm sure there are plenty of stories, but I can't really remember a whole lot of them. We were kind of nerds though. We would sit around, we play in 64, like I don't know, like our first 6 months living together, like we would get along, we'd have a lot of fun, but we'd also get on each other's nerves a lot. Like we'd be playing the N64 wrestling game, and we'd get like heated over it. We'd get pissed off at each other. Like I remember one time, I think he kicked my chair because like he was pissed off that I had beat him in a game or something like that. So like I don't know, there's no like wild stories of us getting all sort of antics. I mean, he could tell you about the time he was put in the back of a cop car. I wasn't there at the time, and
I
that
wish I'd
happened.
asked him about that story now. I'm not gonna
That happened. That happened here in town. That's all I'll say about that. He probably doesn't even want me saying that.
lie. I can edit it out. I'll send it to both of you and I'll say if Larson wants that edited out.
Oh, I
But
don't think. I don't think he'd give a crap. I don't think he'd give a crap. That's on him now to tell the rest of that story.
fair enough. But you brought up wrestling and discovering it in college then. Was that because of Larson and that friendship group?
I mean, part of it probably, yeah. Like we used to go to Big Jeff's house for the Monday Night War, and Larson would always be there, and we just sort of liked the same things when it came to wrestling. We appreciated the same thing when it came to wrestling, much like in the same way that we would also bond over like movies and to a degree music as well. We had similar tastes there, and so wrestling was sort of the same thing. Like we share to a degree, we share like similar tastes in just how we like our stories to be told,
Mhm.
um, across all different sort of platforms and genres and niches and stuff. And so, yeah, like he was, hanging out with him was definitely one of the things that kept me into wrestling.
You remember the first storyline? You were like, oh, this is wrestling. This is cool.
Yeah, it was when Sting was just hanging out in the rafters all the time, and the big question is when was Sting gonna finally come down and wrestle? That was the big deal. It was like, oh, it's leading to Starcade '97, which ended up being a crap pay-per-view,
Mm.
and that match was totally ruined because of Hulk Hogan. But yeah, it was the Sting stuff. It was that, and then the splinter between the NWO. I always thought that was really well done. Like the NWO was this big thing. It was growing in size, but because of that, it was starting to break apart. There was fissures, and then the wolf pack would start. That was all really well done stuff for the most part. Yeah.
So you brought up the discovering wrestling and things like that. So what comes first? Because I always get confused within the timeline, and that might just be my very stupid brain. I'm not gonna lie. What comes first in the timeline? Is it going in Raw, then Machinima, or do you get laid off correct and then and then going in Raw starts?
So there is a little bit of overlap there. What happened was we were working for Machinima. We started that. He started. I want to say he started in 2008, and then I came on in 2009. But when I came on, it was kind of late into. It was like mid 2009 when I came on. So maybe I don't know. Um, and in any event, like I sort of started properly there in 2010. I think that's when we started. I know 2010 is when we started 10 for the win, and me and him were really on a roll as a professional duo. And then in 2015, I mean, the writing was so on the wall. Like, there was already, I think, multiple rounds of layoffs. It was kind of clear that the Machinima front office didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't really know how to capitalize on what they had. They were spending way more money than they had bringing in, from what I understand, I think. Um, they were just trying to get the company sold for like $1 billion. I think
Hmm.
that's just what I've heard. We were on the outside looking in. We were out here in Sacramento. They were down in LA. So we didn't really have a lot of access to like the inner workings. Larson had actually a lot more sort of insider info that he would, sometimes pass along to me, sometimes not. I would imagine just based off of conversations. And and so by the time 2015 rolled around, I remember it was early. It was like late 2014, I think, when Inside Gaming left Machinima to become Funhouse. And then it was like kind of obvious that it was like, okay, either they're going to double down on like keeping talent in house, in which case we'll be okay, or, which is probably more likely, they're just gonna not want to do in-house talent stuff anymore, and that's what ended up happening. But in 2014, prior to all that, I think probably in late 2014, I always forget the actual month, but in 2014, I think it was September. I want to say it was August or September. Machinima was asking us, me and Larson, to do collaborations with other YouTubers in the network to try to use
Hmm.
our show to, you know, boost the numbers for some of these other YouTubers in their network, and in turn boost our numbers as well. A collaborative effort should, you know, rise all ships.
Yeah, I get it.
And so we did like, they tried to arrange I want to say like probably 7 of these things, and we only ever ended up doing, I want to say 3 of them, because other creators can be so wishy-washy. um and so we ended up doing, one of the guys that was not wishy-washy was Dan Nerd Cubed.
Mm.
And we did a collaboration with him, I think because his popular stuff at the time was GTA 4 content. And so we took a or a Skype call at the time, a Skype call with him, to sort of say, okay, so how are we going to work this out? What do you want to do? Let's bandy out about some ideas. And this was in 2014. One of the first things that we really noticed was Dan had an affinity for pro wrestling. I think he was doing some of the pro wrestling gaming content too, and so he really started getting into the actual product of WWF. And so we were talking about wrestling for a good half hour, 45 minutes before we even started talking about what we were going to do. And because of that, it sort of sparked an idea in my head. I was like, oh, wait, this sounds like a pro wrestling podcast.
Mm.
Larson and I had actually done a pro wrestling podcast called The Tree of Woe prior to that, probably closer to 2011, 2012. And but it was not like a serious thing. It was like me, him, Hilton would be on sometimes, our friend Mark would be on sometimes, and my wife Lacey would be on sometimes. And we would get together once a week. It was a once a week 3-hour thing where we would talk about everything under the sun, and then we'd also do a recap on Monday Night Raw. So
Mm.
it was like, it was wrestling and a lot more. No focus, no trying to like make something real of it. We just, I don't, we just wanted to do it because we wanted to do it. We thought it'd be fun, and see where we go from there. And we did that for a spell, I don't know, 6 months to a year or so. And then we just dropped that. And then Dan was like, oh, we should call it Going in Raw. And then we were like, okay, well, once a month after each pay-per-view, we should do, you know, heading into the next episode of Raw,
Yeah.
we should do Going in Raw. It has a double meaning. And so that was in late 2014, I want to say. And then by the time February of 2015 rolled around, we had gotten laid off.
Yeah.
And so when Larson and I got laid off, we were here in my office trying to figure out what to do next. And one of the first things that we both agreed on was, no matter what, we should keep going in Raw, because at the time, especially podcasts, people were really realizing that podcasts were going to be here to
And the
stay.
market wasn't as saturated,
It
really.
wasn't as saturated, but the money was starting to flow into it. Like, you could,
Yeah.
like people were starting to make good money off of podcasts, and you're absolutely right, the market wasn't saturated. So one of the things that we really sort of understood, and I remember Larson saying this, was we need to keep doing it going in Raw, because that's the kind of thing that could probably bring us some money. And so we're like, okay, we're definitely going to do that. And then it was another, so we kept on doing that. And then I think it was probably in 20, like a year later, like it was a weird situation where like Machinima laid us off. We needed money. And so we decided, okay, we already have the YouTube channel. We're going to do like gaming and movie content like we were doing before.
Mhm.
And so we started to do a 10 for the win type thing. And we sort of realized, and Larson was really the one to sort of put his foot down and say, you know what, like, this isn't really what we're good at. Like, we video games are fine, but it's
Mm.
not really what we want to do. And so at some point, I think it was a year later, like Machinima had laid us off, but they brought us back as on a freelance basis because they needed content. They laid off their content creators, but they needed content. So they're like, hey, do you want to come back? And we were like, well, like, you laid us off. So if we're going to come back, like, we want good money. And
Yeah.
they were between a rock and a hard place, because like they had already booked a bunch of advertising that they had to fulfill,
Yeah.
and they had nobody to fulfill it. They tried to fulfill it with some brand new faces, and the audience hated it. And so they were stuck and they came back. We were shocked. We asked for like a good amount of money and they came back and said, fine, you can have that. And we're
Hmm.
like, okay. So it was like, we'll work once a week. And then they arranged a deal for us to bring 10 for the win back because that was for a podcast. We brought 10 for the win back. So we were able to like stitch together revenue, on top of our own YouTube channel, but we could sort of see where the winds was turning. Like nobody was watching Machinima stuff anymore. And so our content there was not doing well enough to justify them paying us. And so eventually we're like, let's start a Patreon, try to make some
Yeah,
money that way and build from there. Well, when I was putting together the assets for Patreon, we had decided let's do sort of a two-sided Patreon. Let's do like, we'll do reward tiers for gaming content, we'll do reward tiers for going in raw. We'll sort of try to do this, both ways. And what I realized was when I was working on the wrestling assets for going in raw and the Patreon, I understood that a lot more. It was a lot more focused because I'm the
yeah,
graphics guy. It was a lot more focused. And I was like, I understand this. This makes sense. The other stuff is just sort of nebulous. Are we doing gaming? Are we doing movies? We have to niche down this stuff. And so I went to him and I was like, look, maybe we should just ditch the gaming movie stuff altogether, focus exclusively on wrestling. As you said, and you're right, the market was not saturated at the time. And so, sorry, my dog just busted in.
I'm pretty
The
sure
market
mine
wasn't
will at some
saturated.
point. No dramas.
Yeah, there she is. There she is. Let me close my door really quick.
It's cool. I was just gonna say it's bonfire night in the UK, so fireworks
Which,
are going off like crazy.
sorry, hold on. I can't hear you right now. My stupid headphones came out. All right, sorry. What'd you say?
I'm just saying, like, no dramas. My dog will probably come in, and it's bonfire night in the UK, so
Oh, 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 wow. Yeah.
fireworks at the minute are doing my dog's nutting.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so anyways, the space hadn't been saturated too much with pro wrestling stuff. And I'll be honest, I don't even know if we even really put that together. Like we weren't looking for stuff like, okay, how many people are doing this? We were just like, we really love pro wrestling.
Yeah,
It's a niche that we can learn more about while we're making content. We can also offer up our stuff. And Going in Raw had an audience at that point, like a not insignificant audience, because a lot of Dan's people came that way. A lot of our people came that way with us when we left, when we were taken, when we were laid off from Machinima. And so we just made the decision to leap full on into wrestling. We told Dan, we were like, hey, listen, we want to take the Going in Raw branding and do a weekly show, a weekly podcast where we can review what happened in wrestling. And then, and he was fully supportive. He was like, you guys just run with it, do whatever you want to do. And then we basically rebranded the entire channel because when we went back to him, we were like, hey, listen, we want to rebrand our entire channel. This is what we want to go all in on. He was totally cool with that. He was very happy for us. And then we started doing the shorter form stuff. We started doing like top 10 lists for wrestling content. And that stuff really blew up. Like if you were doing that back in 2015 or 2016, 2017,
but yeah,
and then we'd
the
do like
what
shorter
culture
news
era, as
episodes.
I call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, What Culture was doing the same thing. Yeah, and so that stuff was really blowing up. And yeah, that's sort of how it all got started. I
So
remember, I
you,
remember the first video that did really, really well for us was when Paige ran in, like had some police, like got arrested or something in
oh, it was
Vegas,
like
I
a
think.
news brief, wasn't it?
Yeah, that really blew up for us. Yeah,
Yeah, I know which. I believe that's the video, and this sounds like I'm blind smoke, but I believe that's the video that I discovered your channel, if I remember correctly.
that could be because that one did really well. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you do start covering pro wrestling, I know you left gaming because the market was too saturated as I was doing my research for this. So now you're, I'm not going to try and work it out, 7 years into Go Anymore, roughly, maybe a bit more,
Oh, at right now at this point, our
as
tenure
we
is going to be,
record this.
as we record this, our 10-year anniversary is next year.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Right. So as you're 10 years into this, what would you say to 10 years ago, Steve, that's just starting the podcast? And then what would 10 years ago, Steve, think of the podcast now?
I think 10 years ago, Steve would be really happy because Larson and I have managed to build up a really great community that we're very proud of and happy with. It's a community unlike, I believe, unlike any other.
Mm.
Um, and and the fact that we are able to sort of do it the way we want to do it. Larson and I are not fans of sort of being forced into doing stuff that we don't want to do. Like we
Mm.
enjoy every day at noon. We hop on here. We talk about the events of pro wrestling. On Wednesdays, he comes over here. We do like a bunch of short form stuff for the Friendo Club Wrestling
Oh,
channel.
that's
We sort of like really launched into that like big time this year because we knew that there was a demand for it. Um, and so I think that, you know, if 10 years ago, and I sort of picked up on this like when we started doing like when it first blew up for us like in 2016, 2017. I think I understood then. I was like, this is something that I could legitimately see myself doing long term and, you know, paying my mortgage with it and living a life with it. And the fact that that was validated, I think would probably, you know, I'd probably be pretty happy about that. If I were to give advice to myself 10 years ago, I would say like pay closer attention to what YouTube wants,
mm.
because I think too often Larson and I were a bit behind the curve. And I can't complain about where we are. Like when I look at any amount of metrics or any ratings or rankings or whatever, for being a two-man outfit that solely relies on us to do it, I can't complain. We're in a really good spot. It's difficult to compete, you know, in terms of of our overall viewership with guys like Wrestle Talk or Cultaholic. They have the infrastructure to hire staff and to do that. And credit to them, they've understood, I think, better than us. Like Wrestle Talk specifically, like when I went over there in 2019,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, Luke and I chopped it up a little bit, and they're very savvy about understanding what YouTube wants.
Mm.
And I'm not going to say following the algorithm, but understanding, you know, how YouTube works. And I think Larson and I have always been a little bit on the slow side to understand that. And sometimes we've been a little bit too self-indulgent when it came to producing what we wanted to produce. And I'll give you an example. Years ago, and it's content that I love, but we spent way too much time and effort on gaming content within the WWE sphere, meaning like the We Book Raw stuff, the
Mm.
fun wrestling, the W Steve W. That stuff just did not perform very well. It really was not stuff that we should have been concentrating from a business standpoint. We really liked it. A niche sort of segment of our audience appreciated it,
Mm.
but it really didn't do much for us. And if we had spent that time, you know, maybe building out that second channel much earlier for short form content and then keeping the Going in Raw channel for the longer form content, because YouTube switches up their algorithm on a fairly regular basis, or they had anyways. I think they have a good thing going right now. But, you know, there was a period of time when they focused very exclusively on the amount of watch time that people are watching.
Yeah.
Well, that benefited podcasts like us. But then they switched it up to shorter form content that held your attention longer. Well, it took us a little while to understand that's what YouTube really wanted, and that could help. If we had done some of that stuff, that could have helped us a little bit more, you know, on a year to year basis. But that being said, I can't complain at all about where we're at right now. I just think that we probably could have done a better job, you know, paying closer attention to what YouTube was looking for at any given year.
You brought up WrestleTalk, Cultaholic, and people like that. If the ocean wasn't a thing, and like we all lived in the same country and things like that, and even people that you do live in the same country as, sorry, who are some people within the wrestling media space that you feel like deserve their flowers, and you're like, oh, I'd love to work with them more? It can be individual presenters or companies.
Um, I mean, you know, I was lucky enough to be over there and do stuff with Wrestle Talk. I really enjoy what they're doing, like the cast of characters, if you will, that they have over there, and then what they're doing with their short form news content. I think is really, it's really polished and it's really professional, and the guys all come off as very genuine, and that's a very special thing because one day, one day some of them dudes are going to want to go do their own thing. So you need to appreciate what you have right now with Wrestle Talk, because
Mhm.
I think they're in that spot right now where they've got everybody working really well together, and appreciate that while you have it, because one day we're going to steal Luke away from that channel.
Mhm.
But no, I think they've got such a really good thing going, and I love that they've even been able to transition to, instead of doing like the reaction stream, like they go to pubs and just
Oh
hobnob
yeah,
with fans. I love that. I think that's amazing. I think that's really
I
great.
think they did one last night as we
They did.
record
They did one
this.
for
Yeah,
Crown Jewel. Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, I would love. I think that people would get such a kick out of me and Larson being able to do stuff with them, because I know people really liked watching me and Luke do a podcast together, and doing it in person is a much more it's a much more fun thing to do
Mm.
than than the Zoom thing, which kind of anybody can do. Um, and then Cultaholic, I think Adam Pacitti is an absolute genius. I do. I think he's phenomenal. I think that dude probably could have, like, he probably should have his own comedy show on the BBC. I think Pacitti is absolutely a genius. And so I love Cultaholic. I would love to in person get on their podcast with Jack, Matthew, and Ross, because I think they're absolutely terrific. I think their chemistry is fantastic. So yeah, I mean those are guys that I definitely like to work with. Obviously we've done stuff with Alex with Queen of the Ring. We've done plenty of stuff with her. I would, if I had all the time in the world, more projects with her, I think would be a lot of fun. Um, man, I don't know. Like, those are the ones that sort of stand out. I mean, we've worked. I'm not gonna say quite a bit, but we've done plenty of stuff with Brian Zane. I love him. I
Yeah.
think he's an absolutely outstanding human being. We've had interviews with Simon Miller. I think what he's doing is really top notch. Um, but yeah, I think that there's a number of people out there who are just really really savvy, and I'm really looking forward to seeing who comes up in that space in a big way, down the line over the next couple of years.
Mm. So you brought up the Wrestle Talk, your Wrestle Talk appearance in 2017?
2019. It was like
2019. I'm
six
sorry.
months before 8 months before pandemic. Yeah, we were lucky to
Right,
get that
okay.
in. Yeah.
So how did that come about then? I know you was in Scotland for your sister's wedding at the
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I was in yeah, my sister married a Scotsman, and they had like this
time.
really fancy big wedding there, and I don't remember if I reached out to him or he reached out to me, because we were talking about it, because I know Luke listens to the show. I don't know how often he does, but I know he listens. I know he pays attention to the show. And I probably was talking about a lot to prep our audience, because I was going to be gone for like 3 weeks or a
And if
month
I
or something
remember
like that.
correctly from being a fan at the time, this was
Hmm.
like your first extended break
Yeah. Yeah.
since the
Yeah.
podcast began.
Yeah, so we brought in Cal Jack to guest host for 2 weeks. Larson and I had pre-recorded stuff for a week that would last a week, and then I was coming back, I think, after 3 weeks. And so when that word got out, either Luke hit me up or I hit him up. I forget. But we were gonna go. We were doing Scotland first, and then we are gonna go down to London. And I think I knew that Wrestle Talk filmed in London. And so I don't know who reached out to whom. If he didn't reach out to me, I was gonna reach out to him anyways. And so I was like, hey, I'm gonna be in town these dates. If you guys have room for me, let me get in on a thing. I think both of our audience would like that. And he agreed, and so I went down there and had a blast. I was there for a day. I got in for a brief bit on their news show, and then me and Luke did the pod, and it was a blast. It was very sweaty. Like, at the time, I think they've changed offices, but at the time, their podcast office, I think, is smaller than my office here in my house.
Mm.
And they got those lights on you, and so I'm sitting there just sweating my ass sweating my ass off. And but we had a terrific time, just an absolutely great time talking. I can't say enough nice things about Luke. He's an absolute sweetheart, and everybody there was very, very. I Unfortunately, Ollie was out of the office that day, so I didn't get much of a chance to chop it up with him. But everybody else, Lori, Pete, they were all really great.
It's very, very cool, my friend. So when it comes to podcasting, I know we talked about this briefly during our first rambling interview where I was a pathetic mess, I'm not gonna lie. I know we talked about this briefly, but what does Steve have to do to be in that place to be like, okay, I'm gonna record now, I'm gonna podcast now?
Um, I don't know. Well rested, I guess. Well, I mean, I'm not even well rested half the time. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. It's not something that I really need to like turn on or off. Like what you see on the podcast is very much what I am in my real life. Like
Mhm.
there isn't much of a difference. I genuinely enjoy talking to Larson. I enjoy I we trying to make each other laugh, mixing up, what we the great thing about wrestling is that it's not like politics or religion. It's an absurd form of entertainment. Nobody takes it too seriously. And I also think especially this year with losing the enforcer, losing my father, going through some pretty heavy stuff. I think I've just had like a new appreciation for like everything that I have in my life that's good, and my job is an awesome one. And so I think there's been kind of, I don't know, with my from my part, and I honestly kind of feel it from him as well. And I haven't really talked to him about it, but a renewed enthusiasm or a renewed appreciation to just sort of have fun
Yeah,
and have a good time with our conversations. I think other people have noticed it too. Um, so I don't really have to be in like a spot or anything. It's honestly like even when like things are going bad on the outside, being here in front of the camera and doing that is kind of an escape. It's like sometimes sometimes it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about my dad, being in a wheelchair and watching him, decline. I just get to talk about wrestling now. I cannot think about that for an
yeah.
hour. And so I don't really have to be in any sort of mindset to do it. I just sit down and I do it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I was waiting for you to bring this up because I wasn't sure how comfortable you would be about talking. But you brought up losing the enforcer there.
Mhm.
So should we go? What are some, because I pre-recorded my last interview with Larson.
Yeah.
And I basically, if I remember correctly, I think I even sent you the tribute thing, basically
Yeah.
saying this is what's going to go up because we'd already pre-recorded it. But what are some memories of the enforcer that you're like, wow, that's why we miss him, sort of thing.
Oh, dude, there's so many. Golly, he is from the moment we met him in 2017 or 2018 in Long Beach at a New Japan show. It was one of the first shows they did out here. Um, you could just understand the warmth in this guy, and he was a towering person, but you could just tell he had an absolute heart of gold, and he was an amazing nerd, and he was the kind of guy who, yeah, it's so funny because we went back. Uh, I went back, I think, on a stream that I did shortly after he passed, and watched his very first appearance with us when we asked him to be our third man. It was SummerSlam, I think 2020. The pandemic was fully on, and we were like, we need something extra for the show because we're doing all this stuff remotely. We need somebody because Larson was still taking notes at the time, which I don't know why we didn't get a proper note taker ages ago. But like we couldn't engage as much as we wanted to because Larson was taking notes, and we're like, we need somebody to engage with the people a bit more. And we knew Enforcer would fit right in. There's always going to be people who are like, he ruins the chemistry, but those people quickly
Oh
sort of,
no, he adds to it. Oh, he
yeah,
added to
yeah.
it in my
We
opinion.
both understood that, and anybody who knew what they were talking about understood that he was like a brother to us with our chemistry. Like he was a guy who would talk shit to us, who we would talk shit to, and we'd laugh so hard. When I would do, because I think before that I had him doing like some unsolved mystery streams with me,
Mm.
and that's when I realized, oh, this could be really, really good. And so, you know, dude, I'll be honest with you, man. Like, there, anytime we hung out with them, anytime we hung out in person or on stream, it was just better. Like, we would be laughing. And I think that's one thing that he left us with after he passed with me and Larson. I sort of just mentioned it. And I don't know if it is losing somebody that you become that close with, and understanding this guy meant the world to us, and he
Mm.
brought us so much laughter and good times that, like, I'm is like nothing, there's nothing really to be, there's nothing to be grumpy about. Like,
Mm.
we lost this guy. And so it's like we have this, and he left us with all the great memories and all the laughter. And losing him was such a hard thing.
Yeah.
It really was. That getting to do professional wrestling podcasting, it really puts things in perspective. It's like we're lucky to be able to sit here and be best friends and do this podcast together, and we damn sure better appreciate it. And
Yeah.
I think that's one reason, for speaking for me, I don't know if I can speak for Larson. I mean, I kind of feel it with him, but I feel like he really left us with that sense of appreciation for what we
Mm.
have. And we have to appreciate it because it can be gone just like that, and we're left with some amazing memories. I mean, we did a 40-minute tribute video, where we sort of like boil down the best of, the stuff we were laughing the most.
Mm.
And that only scratched the surface. I mean, there are so many recordings I have of him and I watching Unsolved Mysteries or whatever, where we would just be laughing so hard. And I mean, there's hours of clips that I could put together, that I haven't even revisited, that I know exist.
Mm.
But man, yeah, it was. That was a tough one. That was really really hard for us because
Is it okay if
he
I
was the
share a
best.
quick memory with you?
Yeah, please do. I'd love that.
So you basically vouched for me when it came to him coming on my channel. I don't
Yeah,
know
that's right. Yeah.
that conversation ever happened. Like and we had a great conversation. It was going really well. And a segment that we will do in a minute, generic questions,
Hmm.
I was doing with him. I
Hmm.
just started doing the format and I went blank. I can't tell
Hmm.
you. I think it was part of my medical needs or something.
Hmm.
My brain just went blank, and I was like, "What question do I normally ask?" I just asked him what his favorite theme song was. Instead of getting mad, instead of being like, "Why can't you remember it? It's your show." He just
Yeah.
went, "What's your favorite theme song?" And that put me so at ease. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 No, he could do that. He could put he was definitely the kind of guy who would just put you at ease. I remember, they held his friends held a small, a really lovely memorial service for him down there in LA, and Larson and I went down there. Um, and I remember, this is the kind of person the enforcer was. I remember sitting there, and they at a memorial, we did this for my dad, and they did it for him. And every memorial service you get, while people come in, they're doing the slideshow with all different pictures of the enforcer. And I swear, I was looking at this thing, and God bless his friends for putting this thing together, because it really was a great illustration of who he was. But so many of them were so dorky, like, because he was a big nerd like us, like
Yeah.
me and Larson. And it's like I could just hear him, because this is the kind of humor we shared. I could hear him in my ear saying, "Man, come on. Do you got to show this picture of me? I look like a big dork right here. Look at my double chin. Look at what I'm wearing. Look at my hair at the time." And it's one of those things where we loved to roast each other, and we loved to roast ourselves, and because that's so many laughs came from that kind of stuff. I'm a big dummy, and he brought that to the equation. And I miss him so much. I miss his laugh. His laugh is everything to me. And to this day, I mean, I remember coming home, because me and Lacey were at the bar, we were doing our trivia night. On It was a Tuesday when I got the call that he had passed, and I was just I was in shock. Like, I was planning on going down there to see him, um, but I didn't understand the severity. Like I had talked to like one of the people working there, and they had told me, yeah, you know, this is his situation right now. And I had asked, I'm like, you know, is this really, but like, is he still going to be around in a week? Like, can he pull out of this? And they were like, yeah, you know, I'm pretty sure he's going to be around in a week, and he wasn't. It went downhill pretty quickly, I think. And I remember I came home and I rewatched I think the Unsolved Mysteries turkey sandwich bit
Oh yeah,
and honestly, dude, it was either that or his heavy metal, and I was laughing so hard, and I just started crying uncontrollably because it's not fair, you know. It's just not fair.
my favorite
But yeah,
one will always be "Is That My Guy?"
is that my guy? I think I watched that too. There was like a bunch of clips that I just started bringing up because yeah, I think we clipped a bunch of that stuff for Friendo Club Wrestling when
Yeah,
you know when it happened, and I went back and watched that stuff, and I was laughing really hard and sobbing uncontrollably that night watching that stuff, and it's just been a huge hole in our hearts, and we all miss him so dearly. We really do.
definitely. Rest in peace and full circle.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, well, as we get this back on track before I start getting emotional, I'm not gonna lie. What if you talked about having a new appreciation for podcasting and stuff? What would be your advice for podcasters that are just starting out? Maybe they're not getting the views they want to. And then also, what would if this was all to end tomorrow, Steve? What would you want the legacy of Gardening Raw to
So, the thing that I appreciate most, I'll answer the first one. I'm sorry, I'll answer the last one first. The thing that I think we can really be proud about is our approach. I honestly think nobody's got the chemistry that Larson and I have together. Nobody has that because we've known each other for 30 years now, and we really have been like brothers. I mean, we've you know our when we don't we've never fought. We've had disagreements, but we've been annoyed with each other like brothers. But we love each other like brothers as well. Like
be?
it really is, and we want we wanted our community to be. We didn't care if our community wasn't the biggest. We wanted it to be the place where anybody can come, and as long as they were considerate of others and and just sort of nice to each other and respectful of each other, that we value more than anything. And I feel like our approach to critiquing pro wrestling, we try to be honest, and we try to find the positive, but we also try to be honest. If something is not working, we like to talk about that because we'd like to talk about, you know, analysis is, you got to look at the good and the bad,
Yeah.
and it's fun to and it's good to try to be honest about it, and not be disingenuous about it. If you know, these professional wrestlers, they all work their asses off, but if the people creating the stories, if they don't know, if they're getting lost, they don't know what they're doing, then you got to take an honest look at that, and that's what we do, you know. So I think our legacy basically is a community that's positive, and a way of looking at pro wrestling that's both entertaining and tries to understand the silliness and absurdity of it, while at the same time understanding that it's a medium that can really affect you emotionally. It's a medium that can be used to tell intriguing stories and funny stories and serious stories and dramatic stories, and it can, you know, it doesn't all have to be, oh, I don't like this because it should be done different. You got to take a look and analyze the entirety of it, from an honest point of view, and that's what we try to do. We honestly try to do. And so I think our approach to both the community and the analysis of pro wrestling is what I want our legacy to be. I want people to look back and be like, oh, these guys, A, have really amazing chemistry, and B, they seem to have a genuine love for pro wrestling and a respect for pro wrestling, to look at it from an honest standpoint. In terms of advice for podcasters today, it's a much changed field from when we were starting.
Yeah.
Saturation is the key element there. A lot of people diving into it. My suggestion would be look at how podcasts in general are being produced now. Like Larson and I are lucky in that we're sort of like we're like legacy creators, right? Like we've been doing it for a long time and we've been consistent with it for a long time.
Mm,
And so like much of our audience, like we get new people and we get old people leaving, but like our audience is there. Like we're kind of always going to be towards the top of the search fields or the search results. You know, our name is going to pop up with other pro wrestling outlets, and so we've got the audience. We don't have to build from here. Like we do what we can to try to grow. We're always trying to grow.
mm.
But to start fresh new today, I wouldn't do something on Zoom. Like I personally think me and Larson's chemistry is better on Zoom for the podcast because it allows us to be as comfortable as possible. That being said, the presentation of podcasting these days has shifted to in-person multi-camera.
Yeah.
And so I've seen so many podcasts where, you know, they'll have this mic or they'll have like, you know, a handheld mic and they'll just do this with it. You know, they'll just sit here like this. And it allows you to chop up number one, it allows it so many podcasts look good on video these days.
Yeah.
And so they'll get better cameras and they'll have people there editing the podcast down. If you're going to compete, you got to look good. You got to put the time and effort into the production. And I mean, so much of it does rely on, are you any good? Like, do you have a voice that works? Do you have a
Hey,
you
I'm not, and I've done pretty well.
right? Exactly. Yeah.
Hey,
No, no. But here's the thing about you though. And I think I would probably point to you as something people should emulate, and that's you're persistent. Like you've gotten Pachiti on your show, you've gotten me, Larson, you've gotten Alex, you've gotten a number of people on your show because of your persistence. And I think people can look at your show and be like, oh, well, these people have done it. I'm okay doing it. I think that you know persistence is key. I think getting guests is if you're going into like pro wrestling to do it, getting guests is a really good idea. And
it's
there's
hard though.
yeah, I would imagine it is. I would imagine it is. That's what we don't do that. Like I don't really like interviews all that much. I think maybe if Larson ever was ever to like step away and be like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'd probably do interviews a bit more.
Mm,
But like me and him are not good at interviews. Like
mm.
there's like an awkward sit like him and like I don't know other people can be in a conversation together and be fine and be normal.
Is it
When it
almost
comes
like
to
when the camera turns on?
well, it's interviews are like question based,
Mm,
and I have a hard time like turning a random stranger into a conversationalist with me when Larson is there.
mm.
I feel like if it was one on one, I've always felt like if I did one on one interviews, it'd probably be better than if it was. I feel like if Larson did one on one interviews, it'd probably be better than me, him, and somebody else because I don't know when he's going to ask a question or when I can ask him. I'm a chatty Cathy. I will talk
Mm.
to fill awkward space and freeze him out of a conversation. Like I can't sit there and assume, oh, hey, you're gonna ask a question now? Like, are you gonna butt in? I can't stand that little bit of awkward silence waiting for him to say something because I don't know what he's gonna say. And so like it's just I that's why I don't like doing interviews with him. Because they're just always come off as awkward. I just don't like doing them. That being said, if you're starting a podcast, you need to find a way to get your name out there. And so having a guest is like an automatic way to do that. And if you got to plunk down
Because they
some
might
money,
share it and
yeah, exactly. It's advertising. There's this weird conversation I notice online right now or on Twitter right now where there is some smaller podcast who is like very arrogant about not wanting to pay
oh, I
for
saw this today, I think.
yeah, and I don't get it. It's like they're taking it's one thing. So like you have to understand it is a everything in business is a return on investment, right?
Mm,
So somebody can look at I'll give you an example. Um Rocky Romero reached out to me and Larson a year or two ago
Oh,
when Gallows and Anderson and Rocky Romero were putting on their latest pay-per-view, Talking Shop Mania. I think it was 2 or 3. I forget which one it was. They reached out to us. Why? And they said, "Hey, can we come on your show and chat?" Sure. We're not going to pay them because they're asking us.
yeah.
Why? Because Rocky looked at our rankings and saw that he even said this. He was like, you guys are pretty highly ranked. I'm like, we've been doing this a long time, and yeah, we got some good numbers. We're not as, maybe out there on social media. We don't look for hot takes on social media. I'll just talk some shit, or I'll point out stuff that I like, or I'll talk about Star Trek on Twitter. We don't really do that. So maybe we're not on the radar of some people. But Rocky reached out to us because we've got a following. We're not
Mm.
paying them. They're not paying us. That's a mutually beneficial relationship right there, right?
So have I got to pay you for this?
No, because I like you, Tom.
Ah,
But if you reached out to somebody and they looked at your numbers, they would then have to decide, is it worth it for me to do this? Or am I going to send him my rates? And then you decide, is this worth
yeah,
it for me? Right?
yeah,
It's a business. So if you're going to sit there as a podcast and say, I'm not going to pay my guests, well, if you don't have the numbers to back it up, good luck getting guests.
mm,
And that's just called the market. That's just the
yeah.
market working out for you or not. And so if you reached out to, I'd say,
I'll give you an example. Nick Dinsmore.
okay, oh yeah, Nick, are you doing a Nick Dinsmore interview?
There's one on my channel. Yeah, there's one
Oh,
already on
that's
my channel.
awesome. That's great. If you reached out to, let's say, Jordan Grace, right? A known name higher up on the food chain in non WWE, non AEW ranks, right?
Mm,
Former champion in Impact. I don't know if she's a champion now, the Knockouts of it. I don't know. Oh, Trinity's their champion right now.
yeah,
Or if you reached out to Trinity, big WWE name, left, big name in Impact right now, right? So, because like WWE and AEW, they got their PR people. Good luck with that. But if you reach out to somebody in Impact, that's a good name for you. If they reach out and say it's going to cost you £100, I don't know what your budget's like, but then you have to think, what can this do for me? Because
yeah,
Trinity or Jordan Grace, they've got a really good following. And if you say, okay, I can put that in my budget for you, can't under these terms though, can you please use your social media when the episode comes out? Can the fact that I'm putting the money in, can you please push that?
yeah,
Just a tweet or something. Can that be part of the deal? You got to negotiate with people because Trinity or Jordan Grace, those are good names. You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? And so now you go down the line. If there are other names who aren't to that level, then maybe they'd consider it mutually beneficial. But for every podcast that has 25 listeners,
mm,
there's probably 50 of them all reaching out to those people who
yeah,
are down on that indie level. So it's like, okay, you guys want me. There's 50 of you. Who's willing to give me $50?
yeah,
Who's willing to give me $75? It's a business. If you want to grow your business, you got to put money into it. And so, yeah, I'd say if you're a smaller podcast and you're trying to get some traction, if your goal is to become a podcaster professionally, you got to treat it like a business like no other.
yeah,
If you want to open up a donut shop, you got to put some money into renting the place and the equipment and the dough and the sugar and the
yeah.
frosting or the glaze, whatever you use.
Now it's
You
made
got
me
to put
hungry.
money into
Thank you
it.
for that.
I know. Now I want donuts.
Yeah,
So if
I
you're
see what
trying
you're
to
saying.
build a business, you got to spend money on the business. If you want to keep getting 25 viewers and trying to build it that way, fine, do that. But you got to put some effort and money into it. And that's just how business works.
It's like, for example, just before we do generic questions, I now have a thumbnail designer and a editor that does
Okay.
nice things for this. So
Yeah.
that's me putting a bit more effort in. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we hired so that Larson could, because we're cheap. We don't we don't like to pay people to do stuff because there's two of us and we just do it. And so like, but we were like, with the enforcer gone, we need Larson to not be doing notes and to be engaging and to be chatting it up and answering questions and stuff and not just
Mm.
me. And so we hired our friend Chris Garrix, or we put a call out, I think, to the friendos like, hey, who wants to do notes? And I think Chris had some experience doing that. And he's wonderful, reliable. He's awesome. And so, we're like, hey, is this a fair rate for you? He said, yeah. I think he was actually, I think, like, oh, I don't need money. I'm like, listen, if you're going to be taking your time to doing notes for us, we're going to pay you. Is
Yeah,
this, and it's not like we pay him an arm and a leg. We're like, is this a fair rate for you to do notes on an episode of Raw? And then you do it for the pay-per-views too. And it was like, yeah, and he's awesome and he's wonderful. And so that allows us to then make more money because Larson can now be engaging and people will react to that and they'll give us money.
I get what you mean completely there. So before we wrap this up, Steve, because believe it or not, my friend, we've been going for just under an hour
Oh
already.
my goodness gracious, Tom.
And like I say, I want to be respectful of your time. But before we do generic questions and things like that, what I want to know, where is your current wrestling fandom? What is the show you're like, yay, I get to watch this tonight and I get to podcast about this tomorrow? What's the show that you look forward to the most?
I never thought I'd say this in a million years, but right now it's Monday Night Raw.
Okay.
Um, it's kind of for it's like some kind of weird reasons. Number one, I feel like most of the stories happen there. And
Mm.
I really like what Triple H is doing these days. I think he's really building some interesting, intriguing stuff. So I want to know what happens next. Um, so I like Raw. SmackDown SmackDown has like bigger things happen, but like less things happen. They only got 2 hours to work with. And I feel like bigger things happen there, but like less of the minutia, less of the detail happens there.
Mm.
And on top of that, it happens on Friday night. It's a terrible time to have that show because like I like to do stuff Friday nights.
Yeah,
Like I haven't even watched it. I already watched Crown Jewel, obviously, but like I gotta watch SmackDown, which happened before Crown Jewel, just so I could talk about it tomorrow.
exactly.
Um, so like I gotta take like some of my Sunday to do that, and on Sundays I like to be doing yard work or watching football or whatever. Um, so I really like Raw. That's probably my A show right now because it's like Monday nights. I finish up with a live stream on my Twitch channel, and then I go sit on my couch and I'll speed through the commercials, and so yeah, I like Raw. It's a good experience for me.
How would Alex Queen of the Ring feel about that now that you look forward to doing the reviews a bit more when at one point you wanted to try and get her to do the reviews based on our conversations?
I think she would. I can't speak for her. I think that she would probably be relieved that I'm not bugging her all the time to come do the Monday Night Raw review. She has her own Smack post show SmackDown review now
Mm.
for bodyslam.net. So I hope that goes well. But yeah, I don't know if it starts being bad again, I'm going to start bugging her again to take over the Raw review.
That's very, very cool, my friend. So as we look at wrapping this up, Steve, because like I said, I want to say thank you for a great conversation. Thank you for
Yeah.
coming on. Thank you for a great time. But as we wrap this up, we are going to do a segment that I call generic questions. Those of
All
you that
right.
have seen my interviews before, notice where I'll ask Steve his favorite match, his favorite overall pay-per-view card, such as Double or Nothing 2019, his favorite wrestler's entrance, his favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, the generic questions Steve might get asked on social media. So now he'll have a place to be like, guys, I have answered this. Please go watch this. So, what's your favorite match of all time?
Okay, my favorite match of all time. I know you sent me these questions and I didn't even think about them. My favorite match of all time is probably I'm gonna say okay. So my favorite actual match of all time is probably the first Kenny Omega Kazuchika Okada match from
Mm,
Wrestle Kingdom 2017. It's either that. There's three of them. It's either
that's fine.
that or there's two John Cena matches. It's either RVD versus Cena at One Night Stand, just because the atmosphere was amazing. RVD called his cash in. He cashed in. I was a huge ECW fan at the time. I really loved what WWE was doing with ECW. I thought it was very ballsy. So I love that. All the Cena throws a shirt into the crowd, they throw it back. I thought that was awesome. I loved that. That was so electric. I remember watching it with some friends back down in LA when I was there. And then also it'd be CM Punk versus John Cena at Money in the Bank. I thought that was just again a very cool angle. He was threatening to take the title with him to New Japan
Mm,
or Ring of Honor or whatever. And I thought that match, number one, the match is phenomenal, and the atmosphere, it was electric. And then CM Punk running away with the title, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So it'd be those three. And then also I give it up to end of an era match with Triple H and Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as guest ref. That's a really terrific match. That's like one of my favorite matches too.
Funny enough, that was Larson's favorite match when we did.
Yeah, he always talks about end of an era. Also, probably Sasha Banks and Bailey at Brooklyn, the first, like their first match in Brooklyn. That's up there too. That's up there
That's
too.
very, very cool, my friend. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view card?
Man, I want to say I think it's. Let me double check this really quick. Because I was thinking about this too, and I think it might be WrestleMania 18. Because if you look at this card, it is basically like the proper invasion angle. They did the invasion angle a year earlier, but if you look at this, Undertaker versus Ric Flair, Booker T versus Edge, Stone Cold versus essentially the NWO, Rock versus Hogan. In the end, you got two of my favorites, Triple H and Chris Jericho. DDP versus Christian, and RVD versus William Regal. That is a killer card right there. Like the pay-per-view might have been on the underwhelming side, but my God, that like just that lineup right there, that I remember, and I remember watching that at like a bar with like a bunch of wrestling fans and people going crazy for it. I mean, in retrospect, maybe it's not the greatest in the world, but I mean that to this day, that Rock Hogan moment where the crowd is like just understanding this, that moment. That's really awesome stuff.
Very, very cool. What about your favorite wrestler entrance theme?
Favorite wrestler entrance theme is probably I'm gonna go with like there are obviously the classics. The NWO is always awesome. Jericho's awesome. I mean Stone Cold. Those are the ones that are like a DX. Those are the ones that like yeah, those are cool, right? Those are the best. You can't go wrong with any of those. My personal favorite that I always used to go crazy for. God, Booker T's was so good. In the end, I'd probably go with Triple H's My Time.
Okay. Why
That
does that one
one,
speak to you?
it's so cool. It's so cool. And I was such a big fan of him. I'm always a huge fan when somebody reinvents themselves and not only reinvents themselves into a main eventer. Like he went from being a mid card, like an upper mid card guy with DX, and he found a way to get out of that and rebrand himself as the game. And he just he looked like he belonged as champion in the main event. I was always a Triple H guy. I'm a Triple H guy now. I think, yeah, my time was the thing, man. I thought that was really cool.
What about your favorite tag team?
My favorite tag team of all time is probably, oh man, probably the Outsiders, probably Hall and Nash. Like you took two. I mean, Hall should have been a world champion in WWF, but you take these two like main event WrestleMania guys. These two guys, like one of them whom was like a champion in WWF for a year, and then they come over to WCW as a tag team. That was the coolest shit. That was so cool. I love that so much. I'm gonna go with the Outsiders. Play Hall and Nash. They were cool.
And then finally, the biggest generic question, in my opinion, Steve, who is your favorite overall wrestler?
Oh man, it's probably gonna be in terms of the total package, everything about it, from the storytelling, the in ring, the accomplishments, the look. It's Triple H. He was everything, man. He was the most metal dude there was. He would cheat. I remember being so pissed off when Jericho won that championship and then Triple H bullied the
Oh, the
ref
one
into
night
reversing
thing,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, he bullied the ref. He was like, "That ain't happening. You're reversing this," and he did. I was pissed off. But I was like, "God damn, that's some really good heel work right there." And then China looked like $1,000,000. I mean, in the end, yeah, he never had a bad theme song. He had Lemmy the whole time, and now he's running it and he's doing it his way, and he's got the judgment. He's booking all these wrestlers to their fullest potential. I'm a Triple H guy.
That's very, very cool, my friend. So as we wrap this up, Steve, the question I now end this show on is, I believe as content creators, people with social media, we're all gonna live forever in some sort of very strange way, if you think about the world. So what is one piece of content you want you and Going in Raw to be remembered for? And one that you're like, yuck, please forget about.
The one I want people to remember me for is definitely going to be the Enforcer tribute video, because you got three guys who just love hanging out with each other, making each
The
other laugh,
tribute
and
live
that's
stream.
yeah. We did the live stream, but then I think we boiled down, like we took like the all the best of clips and
Oh,
we put them on Friendo Club Wrestling. I forget. I don't know. Maybe we didn't. Maybe we. I think no. Maybe I
I
just put
think
the
you did.
tribute.
I think you did now I say that. But
Yeah, it could
sorry, I
be.
interrupted you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we put something on the Friendo Club Wrestling, and it's just honestly, it's just the best of the Enforcer, and that's peak Going in Raw for me, is when the Enforcer, me and Larson were all doing our thing. You know, it was lightning in a bottle with us. I love it to death. It's my favorite thing in the world. So I would say that, because you're not going to get bigger laughs. You're not going to get bigger laughs anywhere. Piece of content that I'm like, yuck. I don't know. Probably one of our early, our opinions have changed and developed, and our minds have opened up a lot over the years. And so probably an early, like an early top 10 or an early top 5, where we talk maybe a little bit more shit than I would now. Our minds a little bit more closed than they are now. Probably content like that, where I'm like, it doesn't really reflect where I've come in that time. But I don't
That's
know a specific one.
that's very, very cool, my friend. So as we wrap this up, Steve, promote yourself, please. Where can the good people find you, Going in Raw, and everything in between? Thank you for a
Oh
great
man.
conversation.
Well, thank you, Tom, for having me. I appreciate it. As far as where you can find it, I'll give you the same answer we give anybody who does like has us on our show. Just Google Steve and Larson. Google Going in Raw, and then we're everywhere. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitch. We're on podcast apps. Just go in the old search or Bing or whatever you're using. Put in Going in Raw, and you can find us.
It's well worth doing, guys. Well, two of the nicest creators out there, and two of the ones that took a shot on me when I was first starting this ridiculous channel. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom to Trash on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Tom to Trash, or X, as we're now calling it, on X at Tom to Trash. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.